Well, it is time, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the first of what will be a 6-week series as part of the NAA and National FFA Agricultural Education for All platform, which is a platform designed to encourage and create welcoming, safe spaces for all individuals in our organizations, and that individuals know that they can be celebrated as their authentic selves. This is a partnership with Millennial Learning Concepts, which Dr. Roger Cleveland is the lead partner on, and he has invited some of his associates to help with these weekly sessions. I will introduce one of them momentarily, and you'll meet the others throughout the course of the next 6 weeks. And our partnership and relationship with Dr. Cleveland started about 1.5 years ago, and he's been working with both National FFA and NAAE on overall assessments and audits of our organizations so that we can make sure that we are a welcoming and safe place for all individuals as their authentic selves. And so you'll be hearing more about our efforts in those areas, and these sessions being part of that. Today's session is entitled Civility for Critical Conversations. This session is really important, especially during this current time where we're all having differing opinions and everyone feels very, very passionate about theirs, to make sure that we are civil and appropriate and engaged properly, and that we're also good listeners and good humans during that process. And so Dr. Erica Gray will be helping us gain an awareness of the impact of our actions and how we can have cultural competence during those conversations, especially as those of us that are educators know how important that will be, not only with colleagues, but with students. And so we're thrilled to have Dr. Erica Gray with us. As I said, she's one of 4 of the different trainers that we'll have over the course of the next 6 weeks. These sessions will be every Wednesday from now until the end of August, every day at 3 Eastern. You can go to the NAA website to sign up and register, and then you'll get the direct link like you did for today's. And you will get professional development credit for it, assuming that we have on record that you attended the session, and we'll email those to you electronically. So again, I'd like to welcome and introduce to you all Dr. Erica Gray. She is currently the Director of Persistence and Scholarship at Kentucky State University. She has a Bachelor's of Arts in English from the University of Louisville and a Master in Teaching from Spalding. And her Doctor of Educational Leadership is also from Spalding University. She's worked with middle school language arts. She's been a counselor for TRIO Talent Search Program. And she's also engaged in a number of advising for chemical and electrical engineering majors. She is an expert in writing, proofreading, and editing, which I certainly could use a lot of work in. And she's big into fitness, as she co-owns Twisted Sister Fitness. She works significantly with helping others understand cultural competence and civility, and we're delighted to have you here with us today, Dr. Erica Gray. For those of you that are watching, we are recording it, so you'll be able to come back and look at this through the NAA website, and we'll post all of that. And again, feel free to share your video or not. We're going to also try to do some breakout rooms. We'll see how that goes. And as I said, Olivia Thomas and I at NAA will be monitoring the chat and trying to announce, so that you don't have to worry about doing that, Dr. Gray. So I will hand it over to you, Dr. Gray, and please let us know if you need anything. We have a great crowd, and I think you're going to enjoy speaking with our agricultural educators today. Welcome.
Thank you. I do have one question.
Yes.
So, I guess, can you send a message and tell me how to do the breakouts when it's not until the end, but
okay, sounds good. Olivia and I will work on that until then, and yes, we'll I'll jump in and let you know where we're at on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are you wanting to do just a randomized breakout room so everybody just goes wherever?
Yes, there's 4 options. My middle school brain was like, I need to make sure friends aren't with friends, but you can't control it.
Yeah, if you just want to let me know what the 4 options are in the chat or over email, I can get the breakup room set up. And
okay, I'm gonna email it to you really quick.
Okay, then it's just a quick push of a button and everybody scatters.
Okay.
Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm moving really, really quickly.
If there's anything we've learned during COVID, it's that we all can learn to be more patient and flexible.
right? Like there's no rush anymore. Ellen and Olivia.
Yeah, you can just send it to me and I can get it to Olivia too.
Got it. Okay. Sent.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello again. I'm going to start with an activity because, again, middle school brain. Hopefully everyone has used Poll Everywhere before, which is what I'm going to start with. When the screen shows, it has the code that you'll use to send in your answer, as well as the question too, but I'm going to say the question also. Oops. Can everyone see that? Nope. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So the first question is, do you believe civility can be taught? A is yes, B is no. If you want to text it, you can text it, or you can do it from a desktop or laptop or any device you're using. And at any moment, if you need me to slow down, just send a message and I will. Oops. The next question, does civility have a place in education and why?
That one we may want to give a bit of time.
Mm-hmm. And there we go. Show responses. Oh, I'm sorry. This time you can also add your why. Like you can add a little bit more context too. You don't have to just say yes, or you can just say yes. So mostly yes, and one yes, need to interact with others of all kinds. Should be structured throughout to allow for deeper thought level as they get older. Of course, we all need to be respectful of one another, students, teachers, colleagues, and stakeholders. Yes, we have the opportunity to interact with America's youth and future leaders, voters, etc. Yes, make the classroom accepting for everyone. Good opportunity for modeling good behavior. Yes, it is the basis to learning anything. It must be present at the beginning for all to feel comfortable interacting. I want to teach my kids that civility is important to employability skills, but also to grow as an individual. It's key to understanding humanity of students we serve. Yes, because our students aren't going to live as hermits, well, most, and need to learn to interact to fill needs. Yes, every opportunity for learning allows students to grow as individuals and love those around them. Yes, in order for learning to occur at any level, compassion and understanding are key. I am gonna go to the next question. Nope, they're still coming. Civility is a vital part of communication and subsequent understanding. If we don't allow it, where will they learn it? Yes, education should be inclusive for all. and always. Oops, and I'm frozen. Next question. Do you believe we are currently living in a race war? A is yes, B is no. Oh, and for informational purposes, I'm going to put all of the data together to make a Wordle, and then I'll have them distributed out so you can see like the makeup of diversity of thought, which is my objective for this personally. Next question. Do you believe America's response to its current state is racially motivated? Yes is A, B is no. Excuse me.
Can you clarify what its state means? And I think somebody else had that in the chat.
The current feeling, tone, environment, interactions, media presence, relationships, relatability. In short, current environment. Perfect. So, one, thank you for participating, because that is always kind of a little iffy. You never know. I am using a PowerPoint for this. I will send it out, or send it to Ellen and Olivia to share. I'm willing to have further conversation. If you have questions, please ask them. I think that's it, and I'm going to start now. So I titled this "Civility is an Action" because personally, I feel like when we teach things, we show our students how to do it, no matter what it is. I feel like there's always an action to whatever instruction we give. And I feel like there's an action to being empathetic, to treating people as humans, to respecting people. I feel like you have to intentionally do those things. And that's where the title came from. So by definition, civility is the formal politeness and courtesy in behavior or speech. So the way that we talk to people, the way that we instruct our students, the way that we work with our colleagues, not saying that your personality can't be in that communication, but being observant of how you talk to people and the tone that you use, the language that you choose to use, all helps build relationship, which then helps understanding each other and growing from that by learning from each other. Definition of respect: just having a regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, and traditions of other people. Everyone doesn't understand or know every single tradition, ethnicity, and background of all the people that we interact with, especially when we're working in different populations of people. No one has ever said that we have to understand every single thing from the moment that we meet a person or sit in someone's class or have a face-to-face conversation. What would make the world a lot more better is if we understand that respecting people's differences is how respect gets passed on. So I'm going to use a household as an example. When children see action, they automatically think that that action is right. One, because their parents are doing it, but two, because it's what they see. Children are in, let me pause for a second. What I put together can be used in a workplace, in a classroom setting, in a group of friends. So my language may change from children to students to employees to coworkers. And that's only because I feel like civility is general and it becomes specified within controlled environments. So in a classroom, in a work setting, in a group of friends. When we understand the people that we're talking to, one, it's not going to happen the moment you say hello, of course. It happens through communication and relationship. When we understand people and the reasons why they think the way they do, the background that shaped who they've become, the traditions they were raised in, it helps the relationship grow. Seeing that somebody's different from you helps you also teach people to see people that are different from them. Today's objectives: gain awareness of the impact of actions upon others, the organization, and the individual. Understand what constitutes cultural competence and cultural incompetence. Improve skills in communicating across cultures. Know the action steps needed to value others in the classroom or workplace. Excuse me. Civility in a hostile society and how to teach in it. Hostile sounds negative, feels like tension, feels like confrontation, feels like I don't want to be around it or a part of it. However, when you can't control the environment, and by environment, I'm saying country, city, state that you live in, you can only control your household, your actions, your observations, and how you react to them. You have to address that it's hostile, or you have to address that it's calming, nurturing, peaceful, and amazing. Whatever it is, it has to be addressed and confronted and part of your communication in order for you to work through it. You may feel like when you're in a hostile environment or an environment that doesn't feel like people are peaceful and respectful and have empathy, that politeness might not work or respect just isn't there. So you don't pay attention to it. You feel like it doesn't exist. I'm not going to try to change it. I'm going to keep doing what I need to do to get whatever I need to get completed. While that seems like an okay approach, it's kind of like a missed opportunity. Can you change everybody's perspective and feelings and make an entire environment be peaceful and nurturing in the way that you want it to be? Maybe not initially, but the way that you respond and how you act and how you talk and how you communicate helps other people want to have the same thing. Like maybe they never knew that it was possible to change an environment of a workplace, or maybe they never knew that just raising a hand and having a conversation and asking a quote unquote hard question could make someone in leadership change the way that things are running in a building, in an office, in a group of friends. Hard conversations are very uncomfortable. they almost have to be uncomfortable for you to get to a place where it's easy to talk about it. It also challenges you to step outside of whatever role you're in. You know, sometimes we feel like this is above my pay grade, or I'm not responsible for that, or no one said I had to do that. It's everyone's responsibility to ensure that other people are treated equally, fairly. I won't say equally, fairly. It's our responsibility to see something that's wrong or just maybe not okay or unethical. We can politely say, I don't think that's right. This is why. Of course, your word usage will be different, but you can say those things. You have freedom to say those things. You almost have a responsibility to say those things. And mostly within a classroom setting, your response to those kind of things help foster and shape how other people treat each other within your classroom. And then it goes outside of your classroom, which then goes to other people. And now you fostering and approaching and confronting something that seemed hard helps other people learn, grow, thrive, and develop. Oops, I'm sorry. The psychology of civility. So we agreed on the poll that civility can be taught. When teaching civility, we have to show civility. Showing civility doesn't mean ignoring things. It doesn't mean being quiet. It doesn't mean you don't have an opinion about something. Showing the action of civility is saying, I understand that someone's behavior towards something, someone's communication, someone's response isn't fair or right. But I also have to understand that I might have at some point had problems with choosing to think with a mind of civility as well. We have, well, I won't say we. It is possible that we all have been in a situation where being civil just doesn't seem like the thing you want to do. You don't feel like being civil. You want to answer in a way that proves something to somebody else, and your tone may be completely off. It may be negative, and you don't care because you want them to feel whatever the feeling is that you have. That is totally okay and understandable. However, the civility comes in when you stop and think before you speak. Do we do that easily? No. Did Communication 101 teach us that in undergrad? It attempted to. It probably did not. Experience is what teaches you civility. The experiences that you have in sharing them genuinely and authentically is how civility is passed on. I broke down civility into 4 tenets, I guess. Respect, empathy, self-control, and awareness. Being a little transparent. Self-control might be the hardest one of these 4 for me. And I feel that way because when I see something happen, my first thought isn't, oh my goodness, what if that was me? How would I want somebody to react? My first thought is to react or to form an opinion or to just want to fix it. Lacking self-control is what makes us skip that first thing that I said a slide ago, and that's thinking before speaking. And I'm going to add thinking before acting too. You can't get back an action that you've already put out into the universe. Your response is already there. You can apologize. You can change your tone. You can change your thought. You can change your feeling about it. But once you do it, It's done. It's out there. You need to learn from it. Observing it and knowing that you were wrong for the way that you responded is how you start to improve your self-control, which makes you more aware, makes you more empathetic, and allows you to show respect in a way, not that you're ignoring something, but that you're kind of, you're supporting a response that you're trying to teach somebody. So, well, no, let me go back. These 4 tenets can also shape how you teach, how you create assignments, projects, even, I think the grade levels are pretty diverse in this group. So even if you have learning centers or breakout sessions after you do a lecture, you can still add in empathy, awareness, self-control, and respect so that groups, like small groups of students, are acting in that way within each other.
Dr. Gray, we have a question related to that from the chat. And the question is, how can you have empathy if you haven't lived or experienced it? Wouldn't that be sympathy? You know, what's the difference of trying to understand versus being in their shoes?
Correct. Empathy and sympathy are completely different, and one is experience and one is not. Sympathizing with a situation is saying, I might not have experienced that before, but from my observation, it doesn't look right, and I want to help however I can help. Empathizing is, that happened to me. I wish it didn't go this way, and by it not going this way, I'm going to respond in this way. How do you teach that? It's taught by transparency. I don't know if this is a horrible example or not, but I think that it's a genuine one. When you have a friend who has a spouse that passes away, you've never been married before, you have no idea what that feels like. But you do know that they were always together, they loved each other, it was totally unexpected. You sympathize with that. Same situation, but I am married and I've lost a spouse too. I know exactly how that feels. I know that it is an extremely horrible and detrimental situation. I'm going to do all of the things that somebody might not have done for me because it's what I wanted or what I needed in that moment, just to help that person. Sorry. Going back to how to implement civility in your environment. So classroom, workspace or workplace, department, group settings. If you participate in community organizations and you want people to start fostering civility in their actions. So how do you do that? 1, leading by example. 2, being cautious of language. 3, treat all people with respect, even children. And I put even children because I do know people who do teach and possibly don't consider that children are people too. And if you want them to respect you, you have to respect them. Apologize when you're wrong. I'm going back to apologize when you're wrong. It is okay to not understand or acknowledge that you're wrong until after you've thought about it. We process things differently, and that is totally fine. It is also an opportunity to create a barrier within your communication to say, at this moment, I don't have a response to that. I do want to process it and then have a conversation. That's a form of communication. Instead of just, I'm not apologizing, I'm walking away. If you need to think about it, say that. Being authentic and transparent is what helps build relationships. 5, you can disagree with intelligence, so using facts. And sometimes it's tricky because a person's tone when disagreeing with intelligence can come across a little negative. Humor and civil discourse. Disagreements are completely natural. It's how we communicate the disagreements that makes a difference. 6, don't let anger and emotion distract you from listening. 7, teach or implement character strengths. 8, create barriers for civility in the workplace or classroom. And 9, be tolerant of people and where they come from and that they are different. Ellen, can I ask you a question real quick? Oh, never mind. I found it.
You good?
Yes, I wanted to see if anybody had additional questions, but I see it now. And it was just a conversation. So, okay. The world around us.
There is a question actually, Dr. Gray, that just came in related to the 7 that you had listed on that previous slide. And it says, for 5, does it mean you are using intelligence humor as a way to disagree?
So you're using, so let's say somebody disagrees on something that is a scientific fact, but we know, we've read, we understand, we've learned facts that would disagree with what they're saying. That's what I mean by intelligence. For humor, this one's personal for me. I get uncomfortable with conflict sometimes in conversation, and my immediate response is to find something funny. Not if it's not a funny situation, but I like to insert humor, 1, so people don't feel tense about the conversation, and 2, because it's probably a disagreement that's not like earth-shattering or we can't ever talk again, and I don't want it to get to that point. So personally, I try to find something funny. Civil discourse is just continuing the conversation with a fair and equal tone, and then when the conversation's over, you leave it at that. Not banter where it has to go back and forth and somebody has to be right or wrong. It's just conversation.
And then the other question is, how do we, so I believe that they are
Create barriers.
Yes.
Okay, I can agree that I wasn't clear on that part. Not barriers with civility, barriers with communication. So when we communicate with people, sometimes the conversation gets deeper than we expected. Sometimes it goes in directions that we didn't intend for it to go. Barriers come in when you explicitly say either, I don't feel comfortable talking about this, I no longer want to talk about this, let me process that before I give you my response. It's kind of like protecting, 1, your energy, 2, your communication, and 3, making sure you use the language that you want to put out and you're not just responding in that moment because you feel like you have to. Oops, where did it go? There we go. So the world around us, as it, 1, relates to civility, 2, communicating in a civil way. We can't ignore, we can't ignore what the state of the country is. And by state, I mean tone, feeling, environments that we have to work in, shop in, live in. We can't shelter what's true. We can't create a new world that should have said within. Please don't judge me or the fact that in my bio it said that I do proofreading and editing and then I have a mistake. We can't create a new world within and live in a bubble because we all have to go home. We all have to go to work. We all have to interact with people who are not like us, may come from different backgrounds. We can't ignore it. We can communicate, we can understand, and we can support and ally. It is difficult to have conversations with people about things that you've never experienced. It is difficult to make yourself be someone else so that you can understand what they've been through. No one expects that at all. What civility is primarily is communication and listening and reacting or acting. I won't say reacting. Listening to somebody, what they've been through, where they come from, why they think the way they do, is only to help you. It's to help you be able to communicate. It's to help you be able to build relationships. It's also to help you teach other people what communicating with someone who's different from you is like. How do we have difficult conversations? It's all intentional. Does anybody wake up ready to have a difficult conversation? I don't think so. So it's like, well, how do I intentionally have a difficult conversation? You intentionally have a difficult conversation by not avoiding difficult conversation. Do you always have to have the answer in a difficult conversation? No. That's where a barrier would come in again. Well, creating barriers in your communication would come in again. Being able to say, I'm not familiar with this topic. Can I do my own research? And then we have a conversation. Sounds like a lot, but if it's something that's important to the relationship or to the instruction or to the department or your workplace, you'll take a little more time to research it and understand it before you come to a conclusion. You intentionally focus on others' needs and consider how your words will impact others before you speak. You intentionally communicate, and that's short because communication doesn't always have to be a really long conversation and it has to be really tense. People have to disagree. Communication is simply that. If it's responding to a question or telling somebody how you feel about something, communication has to be intentional. Intentionally build a bridge, be a bridge builder and act in a way that creates inclusion. Intentionally appreciate the value of diverse opinions in developing approaches to varying situations. Intentionally understand that conflicts will occur in the workplace and take responsibility for your actions regardless of the situation. Intentionally guard against acting impulsively based on negative assumptions about another's intent, as that can lead to damaged relationships. This is also an area where saying out loud, I don't feel comfortable answering that question right now. I would like to process my answer before I give one, is completely acceptable. Now, the other person might not receive it well, but that's where you too can teach somebody how to communicate effectively and not just respond just because you're in the moment and you feel like you have to respond. If you feel like the answer that you come up with before speaking isn't really what you want to say and you want to learn more and know what you're talking about first, It's totally acceptable. Intentionally avoid tendencies to become caught up in gossip, complaining, or other forms of negativity in day-to-day interactions. Intentionally view difficult situations from a broader and more realistic perspective by considering what they being the person that you're communicating with, mean relative to the overall scheme of things. So sometimes it might be more important for you to think, is having this conversation even effective? Do we really need to have this conversation? And sometimes in whatever situation you're in, whether it's a classroom, workplace, department, in a meeting, you might really feel like the answer that I have isn't even relevant. So I don't feel like I need to speak. That's a form of communication, and that is acceptable. Be supportive in your communication and be observant of your communication and make adjustments to your actions if needed. This next section is relative to the classroom, but it's also very relevant to the workplace. And this part for me is relevant because I teach and I work in a department. So the way that I communicate or implement things in my classroom, I try to stay consistent with my coworkers, not to treat them like they're students, not like that, but just having clear communication across the board that shows inclusion and civility. When it's relevant to race, diversity, cultural competence, it's important to acknowledge what it is that you're seeing within your classroom so that students understand why diversity is important, why cultural competence is important, why understanding differences is important. And you can take different credible media or news outlets and use different tools outside of the classroom to help you implement it within your classroom. Make your classroom a place that embraces challenging questions and diverse viewpoints in an environment of respect. So up front, fostering respect would be key within a classroom, especially if you're going to challenge your students to have difficult conversations collectively. You want them to see you being inclusive of everyone so that they start to learn to be inclusive of everyone as well. Remember that your aim is not to convert or indoctrinate your students against racism, but to expand their minds with facts and new perspectives. An example of this, I teach a cultural competence in teaching class at Kentucky State. Last semester, I had 2 students who grew up in very small rural areas in Kentucky. Coming to Kentucky State, specifically one said these exact words, gave her the opportunity to interact with people who look nothing like her. She had never been in a classroom setting that had more than one person that was not white. She, for the first time, was in a setting where she had teachers that were not white. So her perspective in that class was completely different. Every project and writing assignment that I gave, I had a level of personal experience in so that they can write based on either how their environments have changed, how they have found opportunity in a difference in environment, and how they would use the environment that they grew up in, their current college environment, and implement the things that they learned in their classroom when they start teaching. When you give students flexibility to share their experience, they're more connected with the assignment. They research more, most of them research more. Most of them start to create dialogue on their own in the classroom without me being the person that initiates it. They become interested in cultural competence. So now a class that I just had to take because I needed to graduate has become the centralized focus of how I want my classroom to be. And that's the way I shape the class so that they can start to kind of build an idea of what they wanted their classrooms to look like, with the goal of cultural competency being at the center. Define prejudice and bias to include not only race, but also gender, religion, ethnicity, economic status, sexuality, and many other categories that mark someone as an outsider. This tip alone helps me because my experience with diversity is race and gender. Race, gender, religion, and ethnicity. There are so many more. When I went to college, it's race and gender and religion. For this generation, there are a lot of different aspects of life that they either believe in, live, respect, that we have to learn it now. We have to understand, well, we should be understanding of the students and their differences within our classroom. I have learned a lot more from students in a classroom than I did when I was in a classroom myself, because they're different. I'm not part of their generation. Their life experience is totally different from mine. I see a question. Oh, no, it was a response. Sorry. Now what's in my face? We're totally different from their generation. We struggle to understand why they communicate the way they do. We struggle to understand why they make the choices that they make. But listening to them and understanding just who they are, why they think the way they think, why they do the things they do and make the choices that they make, helps us to understand how to teach them, how to communicate with them, how to relate to them. And I'm not at all saying that we have to start communicating in the way that they do. I am suggesting that understanding who they are helps our communication resonate with them. The same goes with coworkers. I mean, not generationally, but the same goes with coworkers. Here is a list of resources. We're not finished yet. We're going to do breakout rooms. But here's a list of resources that I either read before this or I stopped and read or listened to while creating this. And now, Ellen or Olivia, is there, okay, Ellen or
Olivia, yeah, I believe Olivia made the breakout rooms and will help us get there.
Okay.
Yes, I sure did. Let me get everyone into them. And
so what instructions do you have for us, Dr. Gray, prior to?
I'm so sorry. That's the important part, right? Let me go back. I just closed it ready. Duh. Okay, so we have 4 breakout rooms. The 4 breakout rooms are essentially topics of discussion that you as a teacher or supervisor is overhearing taking place. As the teacher or supervisor, what is your first course of action when you hear the conversations happening? When one student or employee opposes, how do you respond? What would be the primary goal for your communication in this situation? What do you predict or want to happen, even though we know that both of those things are out of our control? We can predict and have thoughts all day, but we cannot control what actually happens. How do you make sure or foster inclusion, diversity, and acceptance moving forward? Oh.
Okay, so it sounds like each group will have their topic, and then how will they moderate that discussion? Are they supposed to moderate it on their own? Will you be coming by?
I'm gonna come by. They are moderating it on their own and having discussion together, and then one person will report the conclusion of the conversation.
Can you put back up what it is, what you just had up there?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, I hit the space bar.
Could you potentially just copy and paste that into the chat? Because once you put it in the chat, we go to our breakout rooms, we'll be able to actually see those same information.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be randomly assigned to a room. And you'll just end up there for those of you that haven't done the breakout part before. So, okay. I think that we're going to need just a little bit more direction, Dr. Gray, on the prompt, on the instructions.
No, I'll put the prompt in here too.
I think that we might just need a little bit more guidance on that before we go to our breakout rooms.
Okay, which
So,
part?
and I think what we may need to do is have you walk us through, maybe either pick a fifth topic or just pick one of the topics and get us started.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's just do one topic for everybody. Like every room has the same topic, but you're discussing it as a group. Does that make it simpler?
Say that again.
So instead of there being 4 options, there just be one topic that everyone discusses in their group, in their breakout room.
I think we can do separate topics, but I just think that there needs to be a little bit more guidance. I'm not sure they understand that. Go ahead and put the prompt back up again, please.
So I'm asking for clarification. We're going to have 4 rooms, and prior to the prompt slide, each of the 4 rooms had their descriptors. There was like 1, all lives matter. So if you were in breakout room 1, that was the focus you'd be leaning to with the mindset of your prompt, and 2 had another discussion item. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. I'm putting it back up. I'm sorry. But yes.
So Dr. Gray, is the idea that, we're kind of walking by and we hear our students make those statements or a coworker, and the question is, how do we react and turn the conversation to something meaningful?
Yes.
Versus just a witch fest or witch hunt or something.
Versus just listening to it and hearing tension start and walking away like we didn't hear anything at all.
Hey, Olivia, can you make it so that you and I and Andrea are in different rooms, and then at least the three of us can facilitate the discussions in those 3 rooms?
Sure, yeah, let me get in here and make sure that we're all kind
Okay, so fine, before we go over, just in real summary, and Dr. Gray, correct me if I'm wrong. So each individuals will be randomly placed into your different breakout rooms.
Correct.
And either Olivia, Andrea, or I will be in there and we'll help facilitate. And in the 4th room, hopefully Dr. Gray can drop in there to get things started, and then she'll be in the rest of them. So in your room, you'll have your prompt, and it'll tell you what your prompt is, whether you're 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the idea is that you are an educator, and you're in that room, and someone in the room is talking about, for example, number 1, all lives matter. And so then what is it that you would like us as each individual breakout room to discuss related to that? How we would handle it? There it is.
Mm-hmm.
What is the first course of action?
This is what I copied and pasted in the chat.
Okay. It hasn't shown up in the chat yet, but perhaps it will show in a moment.
I'll do it again. Hold on 1 second.
I just retyped it for you and put it in the chat.
I did too. Well, oh, because it's saying I'm privately responding to somebody. I am so sorry. Whoever Sarah is, I've just been sending you messages.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready, Olivia. And then how long? We have about 5 minutes in the chat or in the rooms before we come back.
I'm going to say yes, but I will be honest and say I don't even know when this was supposed to end.
Let's go ahead and go with 5 minutes in the breakouts, and then we'll come back and do a real quick breakup and try to be done in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, I am opening our breakout rooms now.
Thank you, Olivia.
You've all been invited to join, so as soon as you accept it, you'll all be moved into the rooms. So make sure that you accept it. Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
So we are in the racism does not exist in the classroom. Let me pull it up so I can tell you exactly what it's supposed to be. Yes, racism does not exist and it's over exaggerated in the media. So I believe that it's like you've heard a student or another teacher say something like this. How would you go about responding to it or handling that situation?
I would ask, why did they say that? Why do they feel that way? What is their, I'm not gonna say, well, what's your evidence behind that? I just would be really simple and be like, oh, well, why do you feel that way?
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
setting a 5-minute timer.
Yes. We actually had that conversation not too long ago with an employee, and we have her son in our class. And she was like, do you really think that there's that much of a racism problem here at school? And I didn't know quite how to answer that, because, you know, I'm up here every day teaching, and yes, there is a problem. So I just had to step back from her and just say, I have an opinion about it, but what is your opinion? And kind of get where she was going from first before I just opened my mouth and jumped in. Because self-control is, sometimes I react before I have time to think it through. That's one of my bad habits that I have.
And does anybody else have a personal experience like that you've, you know, handled a certain way or anything like that?
I don't have a personal experience, but I do think that one thing that we really have to focus on in those situations are, you know, the minute that we lash out and we're like, clearly you're probably not on the same page that we are, you know, they probably won't listen. And I think that every moment is a teachable moment, and we just have to approach things with kindness and, you know, try to understand their perspective. Because if we're too busy focusing in the room on, or, you know, we're outside and we're focusing on everything that we see that's green, we'll miss everything in front of us that may be yellow. So, you know, just, you know, changing perspectives and noticing, you know, where they're at and loving them where they're at, and using every moment as a teachable moment, no matter what the situation.
Is it Christiane, or is it, she had a comment in the chat. It went out to everybody, but she's still muted. Oh, okay.
So in those situations, or if you ever, you know, come upon that situation, how would you personally proceed, you know, after the discussion was done, that last prompt? How do you make sure to, you know, foster inclusion, diversity, and acceptance moving on with either that student or just, you know, in general in the classroom?
Well, since media was involved, I would try to bring different examples of media into the classroom. And that can be done just through like different marketing and advertisements. So you could tie in the agriculture through that as well. You know, we're looking at, you know, how, from a marketing standpoint, you know, how are we attracting this type of, or group or whatnot, and then do the comparison and see what students' responses are. And then you can have more thoughtful conversation around those.
What is the diversity of everybody's program? Like, that makes a huge difference too, because if you teach in a predominantly white area, then your response would be totally different regarding if you teach in an area where it's like 60-40, or if you have a wider variation. Because even within our state, I teach in Arkansas, we are one of the very few areas that actually have non-white students, I guess would be the correct way of saying that. Because, and we have run into some problems here, not to be telling dirty tales on Arkansas, it's just that we're a little slow sometimes getting there. And I think that would make a huge difference, because if your kids aren't used to having, whether it's racism or whether it is prejudice against your gender identification or your religion, it takes on a whole different concept. So yeah, you're going to have to bring in outside influences like media and stuff. But one of the big things my kids see is that every time a video comes out from National FFA, it's mostly white kids. And my black kids pick that up really, really well, because we teach predominantly, our ethnic backgrounds is Caucasian, white, and Latin, or Hispanic.
I can definitely mimic that. We have a very diverse school population. With the program in general, I only have maybe 30 kids at a time in my class, but a handful will be from diverse backgrounds, right? So I had a student from China this last year, and I had a couple of Black students. I had a couple of, I'm trying to remember, there was someone who came from Mexico, and it was amazing. Like, just that little bit of diversity brought such a different light to the program, and it fostered a lot of really great conversations about the history of our particular city and the neighboring cities, and how agriculture had existed previously in our area, but then also the history of agriculture in our country, and how land is, was given and taken from different groups of people, and like thinking about media, but also really incorporating inclusivity in those shared experiences of different groups from where we've been into where we're going. And so being able to look at National FFA stuff and see like this big blanket of just white students is a reminder of why we're doing the work that we're doing, and what we need to like change about our programs to attract different groups of students. So.
We only have just a few more seconds for the group. Is there anyone that wants to volunteer to talk to the full Zoom about what we were talking about? I can do it if not. Okay. Alrighty. It looks like we're
Olivia, I can do it.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that would be great. So
And if I miss something, then somebody just pipe in and say I forgot it, okay?
yeah. Alrighty. I'm gonna go ahead and break us up, so we'll all head back to the rooms now. Oh, well, I guess we'll all return back to the rooms in 60 seconds.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was my user error. I'm gonna start with my group, and I'm gonna ask Shelly to share our discussion and partial conclusion, because we just kept on talking and then our time was up.
Okay. Our statement, let me read it, was we're basically kind of just walking by and we hear someone say, students who are non-white will go back to school first. All other students will return to school when COVID-19 is better managed. And apparently this was actually a statement said by someone. We were discussing the first step is asking for more information, like where's this information coming from, reasoning, and the reasoning or statement behind it kind of guides the rest of the conversation as far as, is it something we need to confront because somebody's feeling quite superior being pale-skinned, or is it something that was read, or is it's an opportunity to go further. But with that, interestingly, of a statement, I think the first thing we discussed was finding out more information, finding out where they got their research, etc., and then educating. Did I get all, Dr. Gray?
Yes. Oops, I'm sorry. Group 1. Anybody? No.
I believe that was the All Lives Matter for people who aren't sure which one group 1 was.
Yes, I'm sorry, Olivia, I'm going to do that right next time.
I'll real quickly share, kind of just to summarize. There was kind of a variety of ways that some folks would want to answer, but one thing that the one big takeaway, and Caitlin shared with me that she found this on a TikTok video, but to ask your students when they keep saying all lives matter, what benefits do I have? What benefits do what I'm saying have on people around me? So using that questioning of your students in order to kind of get them to think about, what are they saying actually? What does that imply? What things does that mean for the people around me? And no two classrooms are you going to get the same response, but that line of questioning was, I think, that all of us kind of really felt pretty confident in.
You know, the other piece to that, what benefits, is who benefits from that ideology. And the other question that we debated was, how neutral should a teacher situation? Is our role to just be blank? And if we say nothing, what does that infer? What does that is implied? And then just or do you voice an opinion, and what you're role modeling is the ability to hear two sides, and you provide your viewpoint as well. And then there was some teachers that chimed in that said it all depends on where you stand in the community, how long you've been in the school system, whether or not you could say something, how it's received, what kind of relationship you have with the students that are involved in that conversation. Because some students, I know their parents, and some students, that I had their parents as students themselves. So I would feel a little more comfortable with that kind of background information, diving a little deeper into a conversation. And then there's also the administration. And, in our school, the administration has said, hey, these topics are going to come up. We want you to handle it this way. So then that kind of puts you in a compliance issue.
Room 3, police brutality does not affect students while in the classroom. Why should we discuss it?
So I took some notes during that conversation, which was good. We also tried to think about what we discussed from today and how civility needs to play a role in engaging in all of these conversations. And so a couple of the comments were around framing the conversation towards abuse of power examples and how that and discuss that rather than just police brutality, since that may be an issue, especially in small towns where there are students in the classroom who are children of the police officers, and you don't want to upset that. What role does the school resource officer play, and not focusing on a single incident, but framing it again as more of an abuse of power. How are you comparing rioting versus peaceful protesting and using that as an educational tool? Bringing in various perspectives or asking students to think about the various perspectives of the incident and providing them with maybe some examples of looking at things in different ways and how our biases can frame those perspectives, not grouping all individuals, and examples of how grouping all individuals is done in many different ways, and maybe asking the students to share some ways that they've been wrongly accused of something in a group, but that can be, again, it's looking at individual actions. Others from the group want to share anything? I know Chloe had some really good thoughts, and Karen and Robin and others. Annette had some good thoughts too.
We just talked, one of the things that stuck with me was the comparison of what goes on in our communities and the United States with the countries that a lot of our students come from. We have a high immigrant population here where I work and in my classrooms. And so those are some of the conversations we've had in the past, is how different the police here in the United States are versus the countries they came from.
And excuse me, group 4, racism does not exist and it is over exaggerated in the media.
So we started out by saying that we would address our students, if I'd use the students as our first example, we're walking by, we'd ask them why they felt that way. Not like pushing it on them and saying, give me examples, but just, genuine. Well, why do you feel that way? What makes you think that? Or what have you seen in the media that has expressed it? As we kind of headed into that, we also talked about, if we got further into that discussion, how we would address things with the students, bringing in personal experiences. If you have relatives of a certain culture, giving them examples and differences. The other thing we talked about is it's going to depend a lot on the demographics within our own classrooms. If you have, 90% Caucasian versus 90% Hispanic, and then or flipped or reversed or all mixed up, kind of taking little baby steps as you go through it and seeing where those conversations can lead to. One example that I gave is I already use the media in my classroom. Like in my vet science class, we look at commercials about pet food. Well, you could take commercials about anything and discuss, well, how did that make you feel? Were you, did you feel uncomfortable based on that? Or what did you notice? So then you're bringing it into the classroom, but you're also bringing in content. So it's not like you're just bringing the elephant right into the room and making students uncomfortable.
Does anybody else from that group have anything to add? So I think collectively, we understand civility. We understand respect and that people should have human rights. I think that from this discussion after the breakout rooms, we all understand that communication is necessary in the moment, and that understanding who you're communicating with. For example, Greg said he's taught some of his students' parents, and the difficulty of the conversation is more comfortable because you know them. But I also think that we all agree that regardless something has to be said. No one said, oh, I'm just going to walk. We're going to walk by. We all agreed that we're just going to keep on walking and not even acknowledge it because that's none of my business. I'm not really concerned. I'll just make sure it doesn't happen in my classroom. We all agree that having a conversation is what either drives change or helps people understand difference in whatever context or content area that they're in. That is all that I have. I don't know if Olivia or Ellen have to do more formal things, but that's the end of my presentation. And I thank you all very much because you all taught me today too.
Well, thank you, certainly, Dr. Gray. And what I'd like to do now is just ask if there's anyone who has specific questions for Dr. Gray that they may want to ask. They can either put them in the chat and stay on. Otherwise, please feel free to go. I want to let you know that a week from today, the next session will be with Dr. Cleveland and Dr. Wright on power, privilege, and practice. And so that'll be another really good time for you to bring your questions and thoughts on how you can address that with your students and work towards working through some of that in a useful manner. So again, thank you to Dr. Gray. Those of you that have additional questions that you'd like to ask of Dr. Gray, please feel free to stay on. We'll stay on for another minute or so if there are questions, and then we can address those individually. And we will email your certificates to the email that you registered for this with probably sometime in the next couple of weeks, along with a link to the recording and a link to the presentation. So Dr. Gray, if you wouldn't mind just staying on, and we'll see if we do have, looks like we have one question here. Do you have some resources you think would help someone continue learning about this topic? So that, I see that Lily asked that question, and we'll definitely make sure that that one slide that Dr. Gray pulled up towards the end that had some of those resources. Any others that you would suggest for Lily, Dr. Gray?
Yes, I was actually responding to her. Lil, if you can send me your email address, I will send you everything that I use for my cultural competence class. Or I can send that with my PowerPoint so that everybody can get it too. But yes, Lily.
Yeah, that'd be great, Dr. Gray. If you're willing to share that, we'll make sure that people know to give you credit for using it.
Yes.
May I ask a question out loud?
Yes, please do.
Respect and the definition of respect. And I have a feeling it's going to keep coming up over and over through all these courses that we're doing. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem I have, and God bless the adults that say this too, is, well, I give respect when I get it. Like, well, that's nice, but I tell my students from day one, the fact that they're living, breathing humans, I was raised to give them respect. Now, if you disrespect me, I will respectfully send your rear end out of the classroom. But I think that's one thing that almost needs to be set from the beginning of a class, like as soon as you meet the kids. And you model it too, because gosh knows I would love to say things that I'm not supposed to say to some of the kids, but it's modeling that respect and defining what respect is in your classroom. Like, I have student relationships where we can joke around, but if they did that with another teacher, they might get in trouble. I feel like FFA teachers and ag teachers, we just see another side of our kids and have deeper relationships and stuff. Am I off here, or am I on track?
And I think that I'm having a moment that you had in our breakout room, because I was about to say something that I should not say. I think that there are adults, and when I say this, some of you are going to picture exactly who this adult is. They feel like simply because I'm an adult, that's it, like nothing else. Classroom management is handled when you have relationships. No students disrespect people they don't like. Like, they don't do that. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Like for 3 years, I went 6th, 7th, 8th, not even on purpose. And 7th grade being the second year, I had a lot of the 6th graders that I had. Some of them remembered that I could be a little crazy, and if how you communicate with me is how I'm going to communicate with you. If I'm not going to cuss any kids out, let's just be clear. But if you decide that you want to talk to me like I'm one of your little friends, I'm going to be one of your little friends. And then you're going to learn not to talk to me like that again. And then in 7th grade, these are totally different people now. And in my classroom, you're doing your work. You might be crazy in somebody else's class. Maybe. That's not on me. Don't bring that in here, because we don't react to each other that way. And when that happens, when you literally have to get out of yourself for a second and not just be a teacher, but remind them that you came from somewhere too, all the disrespect kind of goes away. Yes, they still do stupid stuff. Yes, they make poor decisions. The respect part will stand.
Dr. Gray, I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on our discussion about should a teacher remain neutral in a conversation like that, or is it important to voice an opinion so students learn how to articulate and navigate situations like that?
So I straddle the fence. I largely agree with everything that you said, especially about relationship and having difficult conversations. I also feel like students are supposed to know that you're human and you have a thought or feeling or response to something. It's the way that you say, like it's the delivery. So if you don't agree with what they say, I think it's totally fine, regardless of if you have a strong relationship with them or not, for you to give your opinion. It's when your opinion is being put on them for them to have to agree with it, like you're trying to make them feel the same way. That's different. I think that difficult conversations show them that they can talk to you, because, well, especially, I don't know what grade levels you all have, but middle school, they're all difficult. They all have issues. They're all challenged in every way possible. So to add another layer of difficulty outside of the classroom and you being open to having a conversation will allow them to say, oh, what's your last name, Greg? Mr. Snyder is the person that I want to go to when I have a problem, because 1, he's going to listen, and 2, he's real smart and he talks about all the things that we want to talk about anyway. It's kind of like an opportunity to show that you're human and you're normal and you're not just this smart teacher that knows all the things about science. You're like a regular person.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to follow up on that question. So if there's say if you have a student or group of students in your class and you share your opinion on a certain topic, especially if it's a political topic, then those students don't agree with your opinion, then I used to teach middle school. I teach high school now. I have like a really diverse demographic of students. But with that said, if you have students that don't agree with your opinion, I don't know how you feel about damage being done to a relationship that you built with that student.
That's a situation where I would go ahead and answer the question and address it in the setting that it's asked. But if it's a student who it's a relationship that we've built over time, or we have a strong relationship that I don't want to be damaged, I would have a one-on-one conversation too, just so they're learning that people are going to disagree with you and not agree with everything that you say, think, or feel. 2, it's okay. Like, you can have a disagreement and still go to Starbucks the next morning. Like, It's completely fine. It's a teachable moment. It's a teachable moment about respecting difference. It's a teachable moment about how to manage conversation when people don't agree. And in high school, I think is the best time to do it, because like my example of my cultural competence class, they're in college now. And a lot of what they talked about and shared in class came from high school. Their elementary experiences are they're shaped mostly by home.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school, you start to think you're the only smart person in the world, and so are all the other 13-year-olds you hang around.
Mm-hmm.
So by high school, learning to have difficult conversations is what's going to help you in college.
And it's a safe space to have it with a teacher, or with someone to have a disagreement with, versus with someone who maybe isn't prepared with those skills and, has a bad conversation or reacts in a negative way.
And you protect the relationship by making sure you have a one-on-one conversation with them too.
So I absolutely agree, because that's what I've done before, is having one-on-one conversations. But sometimes, I've seen other educators or like colleagues, and they've tried to have a conversation like that with the whole class, with a differing opinion from a student who, of course, like you said, high school, they're more mature and they do better at having those conversations. But like a middle school student, they're really fragile. Like I'm sure you know. One day they're grown, one day they're a baby. So I think you just have to be like really tactful in the effort to, have that type of conversation, and having a different opinion with students that we're supposed to be working with to uplift and, make them better citizens.
Language definitely varies between middle and high school. And I think with high school, you have more of the flexibility to be direct. And middle school, it's very like, I gotta make sure that whatever I say, I understand it's going home. I also have to make sure that the language I use is the language I'm okay with hearing, because they're gonna tell everybody in class what you just talked about.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think one of the things I like to use, and I'm big time on global educating, so our students, I'm in rural Eastern North Carolina, bless their hearts. Dr. Gray, when you were saying diversity, I took some kids to Raleigh and they saw Black people and they were like, we're in the ghetto. I'm like, no, let me explain to you what that is for starters. I grew up north of Baltimore City. Let's break it down. But I like to use global things and what's happening around the world. For instance, in animal science, we read an article about kangaroo meat. And we started discussing, well, would you have it? How would you feel? And then relayed it back to, well, we hunt deer out here. Kangaroo are like deer in Australia. But it's also a national animal, and Bambi is not our national animal. And it really kind of gets those conversations going. And I can take it outside of a hot topic in the US. And eventually we get there. But I think to start out, a lot of times it's using, somebody had said TV commercials and stuff to get the conversation flowing, because you can't walk in on day one, because I've made this mistake many years ago, and say, okay, everybody who agrees with animal welfare, you're now going to argue animal rights, because that environment hasn't been built yet. I think that's a big thing. The relationships are key. And I don't know how everybody else's classroom looks, but I feel good about this generation. I think we were discussing some of the things going on before when we went out for COVID, and I think these kids are learning how to be civil. There's always teenagers, but I feel like we might be in better shape than with my own generation.
So, one, you said something really important. Getting there, when you're having a conversation, especially a difficult one, and you're trying to connect text to world type thing. Making sure you get to the point, because especially with, well, I'll say with middle high school and college, if you don't control the conversation and make sure that it stays safe, it can go everywhere. And then it's like, all right, class is over. And now class is over, they're leaving and they're taking the final moment to be the whole moment. And bringing that back the next day and having to like dissect it, especially if some parents have called the principal by the end of the day, is difficult. So like controlling the environment of the conversation. Yeah. Anybody? Let me look over here because I've missed some stuff. Oh, email addresses. You could play devil's. Patricia, is Patricia still here? No.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Oh, yes, you are. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
I think you can play devil's advocate. I just think it's situational. Like, if the topic is too tense, probably not. Like, there's gonna have to be some direct addressing to that topic, and not saying that you have to make them feel the way that you feel or think the way that you think, or whatever I say comes out of my mouth, y'all gotta agree with it, and then we're moving on. I think some situations become detrimental when the leader in the room doesn't insert or assert anything at all. Some conversations are light enough that you can play devil's advocate, and you could potentially tell them what your view or side is. It depends on a lot of aspects. One, what the topic is, the students in your class, and your relationships.
Yeah, this is my 27th year of teaching, and I'm teaching kids now that I taught their parents. So,
Patricia, you do not look old enough to have taught somebody's parents.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. You do not. But thank you. I'll take it. But our demographic of our kids, the state that I'm in, we are a very small percentage of schools that have a diverse FFA population. So we have Hispanic, we have Black, we have Asian, and then of course we have Caucasian or white. So, but when we travel, it's everything. And so a lot of our kids pick up like, hey, it's us and so, and they're the only other chapter that's got Black kids, or I'm the only Hispanic kid here. And so they pick that up. But in our classrooms, I'd say it's probably 60-40. Yeah. It's probably about 60% Caucasian, 40% other races. So when I say devil's advocate, it's a lot more along the lines of the kids know where they stand with us because we just have that relationship. They know exactly. And I was one of those teachers, Shelley, that always thought because I was a teacher, my kids, I went to college, you need to give me respect. And I had taught at 2 different schools before I got to my 3rd school. And demographically, it was 98% African American and 2% other. And that's where I learned how to be a teacher, because those kids didn't give you respect, you had to earn it. And so 10 years into teaching, my thought process changed immediately. So I brought that to the school that I'm at. But going back to devil's advocate, I like to make my kids think outside of what they've been told. I always tell them, you need to go out and see the world and then come back and fix what you don't like here.
Now, I'm not at all. I mean, I know what agriculture is, okay? I know science. Got that. I know what agriculture is made up of. Teaching it, not so much. However, I do know what FAA is. I do know that students travel to areas that they didn't know existed.
Yeah.
I think that, and you might already do this, this was just like a random light bulb, hey. There's a lot of opportunities for writing and conversation when you go to a conference and it's somewhere that you've never been before, and you feel the difference when you get there. Like, you can go out of town somewhere and just know that you should not be there. You can go travel somewhere, rest areas, whatever, and just know, okay, we're gonna have to move real quick because this don't feel right. And I don't think that students have that feeling yet. Like, they haven't lived yet to know that feeling. But they can acknowledge seeing a difference. They can't acknowledge feeling yet. Well, the mature ones can. I take that back. Mature ones just know. I think younger children see and connect versus feeling and connect with content, not relationship.
I've got one of those hard questions. Shocker, I know. Somehow I'm gonna lose my job or something. I don't know. I'm from Maryland, and I'm from a diverse area, and I've taught different places, diverse and not. But my group of friends is more diverse, so we have those conversations. And I feel like sometimes as a white teacher, especially opening the race conversations up, it's almost like, you're white. How do you know anything? Mm-hmm. Like, and I feel like in some ways, some people, they block. White teachers shouldn't have those conversations because we don't relate. And I guess that's where the empathy and sympathy was. Mm-hmm. But I share things because my friends allow me to with my students. Like, my best friend grew up in the Bronx, New York, but it wasn't a Black neighborhood. It was Black, Hispanic, Italian. It was everything.
Yeah.
And as a Black woman, she grew up in a 2-parent household like me. I mean, we have more in common, but just because we look different, people assume we have different upbringings. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question is for a multiple of people here, because I mean, I'm sure there's other people here that could chime in, is how do you fight those barriers of just because of what I look like doesn't mean we shouldn't be having these conversations? Like, yes, I feel like sometimes my colleagues that aren't white have just had so much negativity that they don't necessarily want to speak up to. Like, people have like shoved them down. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I do.
Or am I making no sense?
So, as it relates to students, you answered the question yourself. Share your experience. The moment they're like, you're a white teacher, how do you know? This is how I know. My best friend is from the Bronx. Do you know what the Bronx is? Context. This is what the Bronx is. My best friend is not white. What does that tell you? It's like sharing your experience, but deliver it in a way that's not like, she's my white teacher, she don't know. No, I'm your white teacher and I have experience. How about that? And end it with a smile. Most of the time that doesn't land right, and they feel away, and then they change their mind about how they're going to approach you or respond to you next time.
One thing I'd like to use is the Confederate flag. Mm-hmm. Where I live now, it's a heritage and hate. I mean, depending who you are.
Right.
Where I grew up, that was a flag that meant hate. That's what the KKK used, even in the 90s, protesting on the corner. So, I mean, I feel like trying to relate that way of something they know, but it's difficult. I mean, I feel as a white teacher, it's difficult sometimes for these conversations.
Race is always going to be never ending. I mean, there's never really, there's no like big wrap up way. If I say this at the end, they're going to get it and all is going to be well. No. Now, you can use it as part of relationship building And then within relationship, there's dialogue and conversation that's ongoing. But collectively, it's not going to end. And I think part of that is where the pushback from non-white teachers comes in, because you don't know what their experience is. You don't know what interactions with race they've had before. And just like we tell people, when somebody says something crazy to you or somebody's being mean, it's never about the person that they're being mean to. It's about somebody else who has put them in that space of being mean. So depending on whether or not it's, oh, this is just my coworker, or, oh, she feels a way, but I want to know why she feels that way, engage a conversation. Now, they might not talk to you. That's not your problem. If they decide, I don't want to talk to her about my experience, it's unfortunate, but you can't control it. Patricia's over there talking on mute, and I want to know what she's talking about.
You're in trouble now.
I was just agreeing and shaking my head. Conversation, where you're talking about kids. Our favorite thing that my kids throw at me is, "You don't know me. You don't know where I come from." I mean, just and I said, "How do you know? You don't know me." And so, but I don't know. I get by with a lot more in my room just because we're very genuine with our kids. And I have a partner teacher, if you can't tell, he's got the Hawaiian background in that too. Right there. Oh, yeah. So.
Yeah, she's not talking to herself.
Yeah. So both of us, we kind of have a different dynamic, because we tell our kids, don't mom and pop us. And we're very fortunate in that, because he's been longer than I have. And yeah. He's been teaching 33 years.
Well, Barry, you don't look old enough to have taught somebody's parents either.
Now, that may have played with Tricia, but but thank you.
I enjoyed this. Shut it off.
Yeah, we've got too much feedback, I think, coming from one side or the other.
It's always easier to manage and have difficult conversations in your classroom, because it's essentially your space. Like, you control what happens in there. But doing it in a way where you know what leaves your classroom is going to be shared with others is like the centralized thing. I want students to change and accept and understand and have civility with each other. How do I do that? Let me start with my classroom and then make them my little ambassadors of civility.
And Dr. Gray, do you think it's important to also admit, I'm also a minority teacher myself, do you think it's important to admit, like, you don't know everything? Because I think, so like, as a minority teacher, I don't know the experience of all minorities. And so, like, even, like, sometimes kids obviously will relate to me a little bit more because I am a minority, but I think it's important for, like, white teachers to say to students, like, I don't know everything. I'm learning, I'm trying to understand the picture or whatever, but I think it's also important for kids to understand we don't have all the answers, and we are learning too, and have the potential to learn from them, which sometimes makes them feel a little more vulnerable, because they're not, like, just feeling like you're talking at them, like you're saying, like, I can learn from you too, kind of thing. And then as an ag teacher, also increasing the visibility of minorities within your curriculum. And I think, like, showing minority students, like, that you care about, their history too, by incorporating that into the curriculum of agriculture, which is, vast with history from minority groups.
I have not always been this way. I think within the last 5 years, I have felt more comfortable saying, I don't share that experience and I don't understand it. And it doesn't have to land in a negative way, like, I don't understand and I don't relate. like I'm better than you. No, I just don't understand. I need you to tell me because I don't know. And everything is not on Google. I don't think they understand that part either. But experience isn't on Google. Like experience is conversation. And if you don't tell me what I don't know because you have experience with it, how am I going to know? This is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, this is
I've had all COVID.
Very, very good. Any final questions? I know we're way over time, but you all chose to stay, which I appreciate, and certainly appreciate Dr. Gray staying. And anything else that you'd like to ask very quickly before we head out? Anybody?
Dr. Gray, can we get your email?
Yeah,
please.
I'll just have a real quick question for the group.
Dang it, I keep accidentally replying to Patricia.
No, just real quick. Miss Stephanie, is that right? Is she still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so when you are teaching in your classroom, do you teach, we call it Survey of Ag, it's the introductory level to ag ed?
Our program is somewhat different. We have 4 content areas. So I specifically teach introduction to natural resources. We don't just do like an overall ed program. We teach like intro to each, like to animal science, plant science, mechanics, and natural resources.
Okay, I guess what I'm looking for is if anybody out there has, because I've started doing a lot of research on different ethnic groups in agriculture, because there's not a whole lot out there as far as like what's in our content standards in our state to teach. And so I've had to purposely go out and start looking up African American inventors, female inventors, because a lot of ours that's listed in our state curriculum is all about white males, you know, who invented this, who invented that. And if y'all have any resources out there that you could like shove my way, I would really appreciate it, because I'm trying to incorporate all that in so that my classroom is a lot more diverse, because I've really kind of opened my eyes here lately about noticing how our agriculture curriculum is being taught in our area anyway. I want to make it more diverse. So if y'all have some of that stuff out there, could you email it to me?
Sure. So Patricia, this is Ellen at NAAE. We're right now working on a 52 weeks of the year highlight of people of color, women, and other groups that have been either innovators in agricultural education. So we'll be providing, I think, what you're asking for. We're working on pulling all of that together right now, because it is incredibly important to showcase and represent those groups so that students see themselves.
Some of the stuff I can pull.
This is Levita.
Yes, ma'am.
From Virginia. And we have Virginia State University, which is an HBCU. And I'm sure they have a ton of that information. And I'll reach out to a professor that I know there to get some information for you and send that to you.
What school?
Virginia State University in Virginia.
Yeah, and I'm going to put mine here because I have started researching a lot of it. I want to incorporate other than George Washington Carver, which is always the go-to because that's the one everybody knows to teach. And I want my kids to see that there is more out there than just a one-tone version. Does that make sense? Is that
help is on the way?
Okay.
Help
because,
is on the way.
I mean, they get it as far as female. I was one of the first 5 women that taught in Arkansas agriculture, and now we're a lot more diverse as far as that. We have a better balance of male and female, so they kind of get the female and agriculture thing. I can teach that context to it, but I'm looking for the other. So thank y'all.
Something to add just quickly, a lot of people forget about the indigenous groups of a lot of countries are still practicing like super sustainable and like closely related to the earth practices. So if you also explore, have kids kind of do a research project on indigenous groups of people, they do a lot of really cool agricultural things, and you can touch a lot of, you know, backgrounds that way.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That really.
The bottom line is we have a lot coming down the way for all of you to use in these areas, and there'll certainly be a lot more, and obviously keep these conversations up. Any parting thoughts, Dr. Gray?
So my parting thought is going to sound real cliche, right? Just be open in your approach to communication about the hard stuff. Like, and know that you're not the expert when you have the conversation. You're learning too, because you don't know everything.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Certainly appreciate you and everyone for staying after, and hopefully we'll see all of you again next week at the same time with Dr. Wright and Dr. Cleveland. I think Dr. Gray is back with us in 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, on cultural humility.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you all. Keep having these conversations, and we'll talk to you all soon and follow up with appropriate materials. Happy Wednesday.